I asked my son when the wedding is, and my daughter-in-law smirked. We got married yesterday. Let me tell you what happened next, and I promise you, this story will make your blood boil and heart ache at the same time. I never thought my life would take such a shocking turn. My name is Althea Monroe, I'm 48, and I've always tried to be the best mother. I live with my son Darius, who is 26, charming, sweet, but sometimes too indecisive for his own good. I raised him with all the love I could, and I always believed he would make the right choices. That morning, I casually asked Darius about the wedding date, expecting him to laugh nervously and tell me it was still far away. Instead, Kamari Hayes, my new daughter-in-law, looked at me with this smug, unreadable smile and said, "We got married yesterday." I felt the words hit me like a punch in the chest. My mouth went dry, my hands shook, and for a moment, I couldn't even breathe. My own son, my sweet Darius, had kept this secret from me. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and completely powerless. Kamari was just 24, ambitious and clever, always knowing how to twist situations to her favor. I realized immediately that she had planned this carefully. She wanted to secure her place in my son's life without letting me, or anyone else, see her true intentions. And the worst part, Darius didn't even see it as a betrayal. He just smiled nervously, like nothing had happened. My heart sank. I spent the day pretending everything was fine, swallowing my anger and disappointment. But deep inside, I knew I couldn't just sit quietly. Kamari had crossed a line, and I had to uncover her true motives. I started noticing little things. How she subtly directed Darius's attention away from family gatherings, the way she casually dismissed my opinions, and the way she made sure everyone saw her as the perfect, loving wife. But I could feel the manipulation under the surface. I promised myself I wouldn't act impulsively. I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't cry in front of her, and I wouldn't let Darius see me lose control. I would watch, learn, and find the cracks in Kamari's perfect image. One day, the world would see her for who she really was. This was just the beginning. From that moment on, my mission became clear. I had to protect my son from making the biggest mistake of his life while revealing Kamari's true self. I wasn't just angry, I was determined. And believe me, Kamari Hayes wouldn't see it coming when the truth finally came out. This was only the first step, and I was ready to take it. I told myself I had to stay calm, to act like I accepted Kamari as my daughter-in-law, even though every part of me screamed not to. I smiled, I nodded, and I welcomed her into the house as if nothing had happened. But inside, I was already watching her, studying every move, every word, every little glance she gave Darius. I needed to know who she really was, beyond the charming smiles and sweet words. It didn't take long for me to notice her subtle manipulations. Kamari had a way of steering Darius's attention away from family events, dropping tiny hints that made him question what I said, or what my advice meant. She laughed softly at his jokes in ways that made him feel like she was the only one who truly understood him. And worse, she sometimes made little comments in front of neighbors, small digs that made me look old-fashioned or overly protective without anyone realizing she was insulting me. I knew I couldn't do this alone, so I reached out to my best friend, Tanya Brooks. Tanya is 50, wise, and no-nonsense, the kind of friend who tells it like it is without sugarcoating. When I explained the situation, she immediately understood. "Althea," she said, "you're not imagining things. Kamari is clever, and she's testing you. But don't let her push you out. Watch, learn, and strike carefully." Her words gave me a little strength. At least someone else could see what I was seeing, someone who wouldn't let me second-guess myself. Every day, I started observing Kamari more closely. I noticed how she subtly controlled conversations, how she smiled at Darius in ways that made him melt, and how she used compliments to put me in a bad light without anyone realizing it. It was cruel, and I hated that my son couldn't see it yet. I felt torn between wanting to protect him and not wanting to destroy his happiness, or at least what he thought was happiness. One afternoon, Kamari invited some neighbors over and, of course, made sure to flaunt her new role. She prepared everything perfectly, talked about how she and Darius were now the perfect couple, and somehow, in her words, made me seem out of touch and overly critical. Everyone laughed politely, and I felt my cheeks burn. But I stayed calm, smiled, and let her think she had won. I knew the truth was still mine to uncover. I realized that Kamari wasn't just ambitious. She was smart, calculating, and dangerous if left unchecked. But I wasn't going to let her take over my family quietly. I would watch, I would learn, and I would find the cracks in her facade. Darius deserved to see her for who she really was, and I would make sure he did. This was just the beginning of my careful, patient investigation, and I wasn't about to let my son, or myself, be fooled any longer. It didn't take long for me to start seeing the cracks in Kamari's perfect image. While everyone else thought she was charming and sweet, I began uncovering little hints of her hidden life. Bills left unpaid, strange phone calls, hushed conversations, things that didn't add up. One evening, I found a stack of overdue notices tucked away in a drawer, along with letters from creditors I had never seen before. Kamari was hiding debts from Darius, and that was just the beginning. I couldn't help but remember something my late husband, Malik, had said years ago. "Althea," he had warned, "some people aren't what they seem. Watch closely before you trust too much." At the time, I had brushed it off, thinking Malik was overcautious. But now his words came back to me with a heavy weight. I realized he had suspected Kamari's manipulative tendencies long before I ever did. My heart ached remembering him, but it also strengthened my resolve. I couldn't let his warning go unheeded. Kamari's cruelty escalated in subtle ways. She started manipulating Darius, planting little suggestions that made him withdraw from family events, even special occasions he had once loved attending. Birthday dinners, weekend visits, family movie nights. She found ways to make him skip them, always giving him a convincing reason, while making me appear controlling or demanding. It was infuriating, watching my son fall under her spell, unaware of the isolation she was creating. I felt more alone than ever. Darius, the boy I raised and loved, didn't see the truth yet. Friends and neighbors praised Kamari for her charm and poise, while I was left questioning my instincts. It was a lonely place to be, caught between my love for my son and my growing distrust of his new wife. I had to remind myself over and over, I couldn't act on emotion. If I let anger or fear guide me, I would lose the advantage I had in uncovering the truth. So I began to act smartly, observing, recording, and documenting every suspicious behavior. I paid attention to her conversations with Darius, her interactions with family, and even the way she handled small household details. I started seeing a pattern. She was methodical, calculating, always thinking several steps ahead. Her ambition wasn't just about marrying into our family, it was about control, power, and keeping Darius dependent on her. Each discovery made my resolve stronger. I knew I had to wait for the right moment to act, to reveal her true self to my son and the rest of the family without letting her suspect I knew. It was a delicate balance between patience and action, and I reminded myself constantly that this wasn't about revenge yet. It was about protecting my son and exposing Kamari's true colors before she could do any more damage. I felt the weight of isolation pressing down, but I also felt a fierce determination rising inside me. I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I was a mother ready to fight for the truth, and Kamari's carefully constructed world was about to start crumbling under my quiet, watchful eye. I finally decided it was time to confront Darius. I couldn't just sit back and watch Kamari manipulate him and isolate him from our family. That evening, when the house was quiet, I gently approached him, my hands trembling slightly. "Darius," I began, "I found things about Kamari that you need to know. She's hiding debts, and I think she's not being honest with you about her intentions." At first, he laughed nervously, trying to brush me off. "Mom, you're overreacting. Kamari loves me. She wouldn't do anything like that," he said, shaking his head. My heart sank. How could he not see what was so obvious to me? The disbelief in his eyes was painful, but I didn't let it break me. I kept my voice steady. "I'm not overreacting. I just want you to be careful. Please look at the facts for yourself." The next day, Kamari went out of her way to make herself appear flawless. She cooked breakfast perfectly, poured Darius his favorite coffee, and even complimented me in front of neighbors who happened to drop by. It was infuriating. She smiled sweetly at Darius, laughed at his jokes, and whispered things that made him beam with pride. To everyone else, she was the perfect wife, charming and considerate. But I knew better. I could see through the mask, and it made my chest tighten with frustration. Emotionally, I felt crushed. Watching my son fall for her act while I had all this knowledge was exhausting. I felt isolated, like I was the only one who could see the truth. I wanted to scream, to tell the neighbors everything right then and there, but I knew that would ruin everything. I had to act smartly, patiently, and quietly. I began planning discreet ways to expose her without pushing Darius away or giving Kamari a chance to cover her tracks. I started recording moments when her lies were clear. Phone calls with creditors, casual comments about our family that didn't add up, and subtle manipulations of Darius. Every small piece of evidence became a tool I could use later. Even as I recorded, I continued to act polite and accepting. I smiled at Kamari, nodded at her stories, and played the role of the unsuspecting mother. But inside, I was alert, cataloging every lie and contradiction. I knew patience was my ally. Each recorded moment was a step closer to showing Darius the truth. That night, as I reviewed the recordings, a sense of quiet determination settled over me. Kamari could play her perfect wife act in public, but she couldn't hide from the truth forever. I promised myself that I would wait for the right moment, when Darius would be ready to see her as she truly was. The emotional pain was heavy, but it only strengthened my resolve. I realized then that this confrontation wasn't about shouting or arguing. It was about strategy, patience, and careful planning. Kamari's lies were no match for the quiet vigilance I had started. One day, Darius would understand, and Kamari's perfect facade would finally crumble. Until then, I would watch, record, and wait. I realized I couldn't take on Kamari alone. She was clever, careful, and always one step ahead if I acted without help. That's when I turned to Imani Carter, my neighbor and longtime friend in her 30s. Imani was smart, bold, and unafraid to dig into things most people ignored. When I told her what was happening, she didn't hesitate. "Althea, we're going to get to the bottom of this. Kamari won't see us coming," she said, her eyes sharp with determination. I felt a surge of relief. Finally, I had an ally. Together, we began quietly tracking Kamari's movements. We noticed the way she handled Darius's trust fund, diverting funds subtly, making small transfers that she thought no one would notice. Bills went unpaid, subscriptions appeared under false names, and certain investments were being siphoned off without Darius realizing it. Each discovery shocked me more, but it also strengthened my resolve. Kamari wasn't just manipulative. She was actively trying to control our lives and secure financial power. We started small, subtle interventions. I carefully hinted to distant family members about discrepancies I noticed, planting seeds of doubt without revealing everything. Imani helped me gather documents and keep a record of every suspicious transaction. We watched Kamari's reactions closely, noting the tiny flickers of irritation whenever I subtly challenged her lies or questioned her decisions. It was clear she was beginning to sense resistance, though she underestimated how methodical our strategy was. Psychologically, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. I had to stay calm, patient, and composed. Kamari was cunning, and one wrong move could alert her. But I was learning to think like her, anticipating how she would respond, planning several steps ahead. Imani and I would spend evenings reviewing notes, discussing patterns, and predicting Kamari's next move. The more we learned, the more I realized how deeply she had embedded herself into Darius's life. At home, Kamari continued her act of the perfect wife, smiling at neighbors, complimenting me publicly, and maintaining the illusion that everything was fine. But behind closed doors, her arrogance and manipulations were unraveling slowly. I could see her growing frustrated when Darius asked me about small details, or when I subtly reminded him of family obligations. She didn't realize yet that her carefully built image was cracking under quiet scrutiny. With every subtle intervention, I felt my confidence grow. I wasn't just a powerless mother watching from the sidelines anymore. I was actively shaping the situation, carefully uncovering her schemes while protecting my son from being completely deceived. Kamari might have been ambitious, but she underestimated my patience and ability to strategize. We continued our careful observation, gathering proof, and slowly setting the stage for the moment when Kamari's lies and manipulations could no longer be hidden. I felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that, while she thought she was in control, the real power was in our hands. Kamari had no idea that her perfect act was about to meet the truth in ways she would never see coming. It was time to test my strategy. I couldn't reveal everything at once, but I needed Kamari to feel that her control over the family wasn't absolute. A minor opportunity presented itself when one of Kamari's hidden debts accidentally came to light during a casual family gathering. A distant cousin mentioned receiving a strange bill, and I carefully guided the conversation to expose Kamari's secret without making it seem like an attack. The moment was small, but it hit her public image harder than she expected. Kamari's smile faltered for just a second, and I noticed Darius's subtle reaction. He looked confused, unsure why this was coming up now, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let my excitement show. This was exactly the opening I had been waiting for, a small crack in her perfect facade. Later, Darius began questioning Kamari's intentions in hushed conversations with me. "Mom, are you sure she's hiding something? Could this be an accident?" he asked, his voice hesitant. I held his hand and looked him in the eyes. "I'm sure, Darius. Pay attention to the patterns, not just one mistake. This is bigger than it seems." He nodded slowly, the first real signs of awareness starting to form. Kamari, of course, noticed that her control was slipping. That evening, she tried to retaliate, using emotional manipulation to turn Darius completely against me. She cried, held his hands, and whispered things like, "Mom doesn't understand me. She's jealous of what we have. Why can't you see that?" Her voice was soft but calculated, designed to make him doubt everything he knew about me. I could see the tension on Darius's face, torn between the two of us. I felt a surge of anger, but I forced myself to resist reacting impulsively. I didn't raise my voice, didn't argue, didn't cry. Instead, I stayed composed, letting her words float in the room while I silently observed her every move. I knew reacting emotionally would only give her power, and I refused to hand it to her. Instead, I focused on my long-term plan, gathering more evidence, recording interactions, and waiting for the right moment to show Darius the full truth. Over the next few days, I watched carefully as Kamari tried to regain control. She overcompensated with kindness and exaggerated gestures, trying to convince everyone she was innocent. But the minor scandal had already planted seeds of doubt, and I could see her growing increasingly reckless in her attempts to maintain the image of the perfect wife. Each time she manipulated, I stayed calm, patient, and observant. I thought I had a handle on interactions discreetly, but I was about to discover the full extent of her ambition and strengthened my strategy for the larger plan. While reviewing some papers, Kamari believed she was countering me. I noticed something alarming. Every move Kamari had been making moves to inherit Malik Monroe's estate entirely. I felt the taste bypassing any restrictions that my late husband had put in place. I wasn't just reacting to her manipulations anymore. She wasn't subtle about it. I was leading the game. There were signed documents, legal notices, and Kamari was starting to realize secretly hired to help her navigate around my authority. Darius's audacity was no longer absolute. She wasn't just trying to control Darius and careful planning. She wanted everything the rest of her lives would unravel had worked before she even knew what hit her. The more I dug, the clearer her plan became. Kamari was manipulating every part of Darius's life to isolate him from me. Small lies, carefully timed suggestions, and whispered doubts about my intentions were all part of her strategy. She made it look like she was the loving wife, the devoted partner, while slowly driving a wedge between Darius and me. The thought of my son being manipulated so completely made my chest tighten, but I refused to show panic or fear. Acting out of emotion would only play into her hands. Her lawyer, who had been working with her quietly, was bold and unbothered by ethics, helping Kamari bypass the rules Malik had set. It was as if they were both convinced that I had no power left, that I could be sidelined easily. Every interaction she had with Darius seemed innocent on the surface, but I could see the calculated effort behind it. She was trying to make me appear controlling, unreasonable, and unnecessary in his life. It was cruel, and it made me feel cornered, but it also lit a fire inside me. I realized I couldn't act recklessly. Kamari was too clever for that. Instead, I began planning carefully, mapping out her moves, and gathering evidence to reveal her for who she truly was. I noted every suspicious phone call, every unexplained transfer, every manipulation aimed at Darius. I started documenting patterns, the timing of her lies, and even subtle emotional triggers she used to sway him. Every detail was crucial. I met with Imani, and together we devised a careful plan to counter Kamari's greed and manipulation. We would expose the lawyer's role, reveal Kamari's lies to extended family members, and show Darius her true intentions without crushing him emotionally. Patience was key. If we acted too early, Kamari might adjust, cover her tracks, or even turn Darius completely against me. Despite feeling cornered, I felt a sense of determination unlike anything I had experienced before. Kamari might have thought she was winning, but she underestimated my persistence, my patience, and my love for my son. Every lie she told, every scheme she plotted, only strengthened my resolve to protect my family and ensure the truth came out. The betrayal had deepened, but so had my strategy. Kamari was dangerous, greedy, and manipulative, but I was ready. I would fight smart, act patiently, and wait for the perfect moment to show Darius the woman she really was. The game had changed, and I was prepared to win. I knew it was time to move beyond just observing Kamari. With Imani by my side, we began carefully setting a trap, one that would make it impossible for her lies to stay hidden any longer. We planned every detail meticulously, creating situations where Kamari's manipulations would surface naturally, without appearing as if we were attacking her. The goal wasn't just revenge, it was justice, and we had to make sure Darius would see the truth for himself. We started by inviting a few close family members over for a small gathering, ensuring that Kamari would feel the need to maintain her perfect wife act. I subtly introduced topics and asked questions that I knew would make her stories unravel. I watched her reactions closely, noting the slight hesitations, the forced smiles, the tiny contradictions in her explanations. Darius, who had been somewhat oblivious before, began noticing the discrepancies too. He frowned at certain comments, tilted his head, and asked questions that Kamari struggled to answer convincingly. I felt a flicker of hope. He was starting to see through her facade. As the days went on, Kamari grew increasingly reckless. Her arrogance got the better of her, and she began making careless remarks and revealing details she thought were insignificant. She talked about trips she hadn't taken, expenses that didn't exist, and relationships she had fabricated to make herself seem more sympathetic. Each slip became a piece of the puzzle, confirming everything I had suspected. I quietly recorded these moments, knowing that they would serve as undeniable proof when the time came. Imani and I coordinated behind the scenes, making sure that every move Kamari made was being tracked and documented. We made subtle interventions to guide conversations, creating opportunities for her contradictions to surface naturally. It was a delicate balance, too obvious and Kamari might cover her tracks, too subtle and the truth might remain hidden. But with patience and careful planning, the trap began to take shape. Darius began asking more questions, his trust in Kamari wavering as inconsistencies mounted. I noticed the confusion in his eyes, the hesitation in his voice, and the doubt that started replacing his initial devotion. Kamari, sensing that something was wrong, tried to regain control, but her efforts only made her more reckless. She continued to over-explain, to embellish stories, and to manipulate, but each lie was now exposing her further instead of protecting her. By the time the final confrontation was ready, I had every piece of evidence I needed. The trap was complete. Kamari's lies were out in the open, and Darius could no longer ignore them. I felt a mix of anticipation and calm resolve. My strategy had shifted from quiet observation to public exposure, and I knew that when the moment came, Kamari would have no way to hide her true self. Everything was in place. I had prepared carefully, balanced patience with precision, and ensured that the truth would speak louder than any act Kamari could put on. The stage was set, and the moment to reveal her deception was approaching. Darius was ready to see the real Kamari, and I was ready to reclaim the honesty and justice my family deserved. The day I had been preparing for finally arrived. I invited Darius and a few close family members to our home under the pretense of a casual family meeting. Imani and I had organized everything carefully, making sure that the moment Kamari could no longer hide her lies would be undeniable. I had compiled all the recordings, documents, and evidence of her manipulations, each piece meticulously labeled and ready to present. My hands were steady, my heart racing, but I remained calm on the surface. This was not about anger, it was about justice. As soon as Kamari arrived, she carried herself with confidence, smiling sweetly and acting as if everything was perfectly normal. Darius, however, had begun to notice the small cracks, and I could see the tension in his eyes. I didn't speak immediately. Instead, I let the room settle, giving her the illusion of control for just a moment longer. Then, I calmly began presenting the evidence. First came the financial documents, overdue bills, hidden transfers, and manipulations of Malik Monroe's estate. Each item was laid out clearly for everyone to see, leaving no room for denial. Kamari's smile faltered slightly, but she tried to maintain composure. I moved on to the recordings, playing snippets where she had lied, manipulated conversations, and tried to isolate me from Darius. I watched carefully as her confident act began to crumble. Each contradiction, each revealed lie, chipped away at the carefully crafted persona she had shown the world. She looked shocked, flustered, and for the first time vulnerable. Darius sat quietly at first, processing everything. His eyes shifted between me and Kamari, confusion giving way to realization. He started asking questions, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Mom, all of this, she did this to us?" I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "Yes, Darius." I've been trying to protect you, to make sure you could see the truth before it was too late." The room was silent except for the soft playback of the recordings, and Kumari could no longer speak without exposing herself further. Her arrogance melted away into panic. She tried to explain, to deny, to blame someone else, but it was too late. Every lie she had carefully hidden was now laid bare. I maintained my dignity, refusing to shout or cry, letting the truth speak louder than any words I could have shouted. The calculated evidence left no room for manipulation, and her facade collapsed completely. Watching Darius's eyes shift from doubt to understanding was a profound moment. He finally saw the wisdom and patience I had shown all along. Kumari's attempts to control him, to isolate him, and to claim what wasn't hers had all failed. She looked around, desperate and exposed, while I stood firm, calm, and unwavering. For the first time, the room felt balanced again. Justice had been served, not through anger, but through careful planning and patience. Kumari had lost her control, Darius had regained clarity, and I had protected my family without stooping to her level. The power of truth had done what anger never could. Kumari's downfall was complete. After the evidence was presented and her lies fully exposed, she had no place left in the family. The extended family and neighbors, once charmed by her carefully constructed image, now saw her for who she truly was, a manipulative, greedy woman who had tried to take everything for herself. Her social standing crumbled, her influence over Darius vanished, and the financial advantages she had schemed to claim were all blocked by the careful legal steps I had taken with Imani's help. She was forced out, humiliated and powerless, unable to deny the truth that had been revealed so clearly. Darius finally came to me, his eyes full of regret and newfound understanding. "Mom," he said softly, "I can't believe I didn't see it sooner. Thank you for protecting me and for being patient. I should have listened from the start." I pulled him into a hug, feeling the warmth of his forgiveness and the relief of knowing our bond had survived Kumari's manipulations. It wasn't just a reconciliation. It was a restoration of trust, a reminder that family could endure even when tested by deception and betrayal. As the days passed, life slowly returned to normal, but I carried with me a new sense of strength and awareness. I reflected on everything Kumari had tried to do, the schemes, the lies, the attempts to isolate me from my son, and I realized that what I had gained was far more than revenge. I had proven to myself that patience, observation, and careful planning were far more powerful than acting on impulse or anger. The experience had tested me in ways I never imagined, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I also realized that true revenge didn't need to be cruel or vengeful. Kumari had been removed from our lives, exposed for her deceit, and left to face the consequences of her actions without me having to stoop to her level. Justice had been served through strategy and dignity, and that was far more satisfying than any impulsive act of retaliation could have been. My family had been protected, our home reclaimed, and my son had regained clarity about the people he could trust. Neighbors and friends began to notice the change too. They admired my composure, my ability to handle such a difficult situation with grace, and the way I had safeguarded my family without losing my dignity. Even distant relatives sent messages of support, acknowledging the courage it took to face deception and come out victorious. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, a calm that came from knowing I had done everything right, everything carefully, and everything with the love of family as my guiding force. Sitting in my living room one quiet evening, I reflected on the journey, the betrayal, the subtle manipulations, the careful planning, and the ultimate revelation. I had protected what mattered most without losing myself in anger or malice. My home, my dignity, and my bond with Darius were intact. I smiled softly to myself, finally feeling the peace I had longed for. I had reclaimed my life and my family, and in doing so, I had proven that strength and wisdom could triumph over deceit. My heart was finally at rest. Do you think Althea handled Kumari the right way, or should she have confronted her sooner and more directly? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear your take. And if you love stories filled with family drama, clever revenge, and emotional twists, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story like this.